So big warm welcome from my end to this year's version of the Maritime Trends to Watch in 2023. I'm Ulrich Kadow, Global Head of Marine at AGCS, and I'm very pleased to host today's session together with my colleagues from our risk consulting team, Rahul, Khanna, our claims division, Regis, Broudin, and our global head of Hull at AGCS, Justus, Heinrich. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that we have a pretty packed agenda for all of you today. So we'll start off with a review of safety and shipping in the numbers, followed by a focal point on the decarbonization and sustainability topic, which is of increasing importance these days, and both of these will be covered by Captain Rahul Khanna. Then we'll go into section 3 and 4, which is on hull and cargo risks that we have seen as predominant drivers over the recent past and what is on the rise, and that goes along with a focus on war and crime, which was an area of attention over the last 12 months as well. And then we'll finish off with a few views from our global head of claims, Regis Broudin, on the claims outlook. I will add a few comments on the insurance market, what all of these things, in our view, mean for insurance carriers, and in particular us at Allianz, followed by a Q&A session. So hopefully there's lots of things that are of interest to you, and we look forward to a lively participation towards the second part of this presentation in the Q&A. I do see we have almost 120 participants so far, and the number is rising. So please use this opportunity to speak with us, challenge us, and hopefully you find this interesting. And with that, I'll hand over to Captain Rahul for section 1 and 2.
Thank you, Ulrich. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and a very warm welcome from my side as well. Just a little bit of a background on the safety and shipping review. We have been publishing the safety and shipping review for the past 10 years, 11 years now. The first one was published back in 2012. And essentially, we are looking at analyzing total losses and incidents in shipping. And over the years, I'm very pleased to say that it has become a market-leading publication and is covered widely across the globe. We are also looking at, apart from the statistics, we're also highlighting key trends and insights on the industry and what are the emerging trends. And this is all what we take over within the safety and shipping review and try to highlight and produce for the community, maritime community at large. On the next slide, let's look at the numbers, the statistics, what we have seen in this year. Before we jump straight into these numbers, let me just quickly explain how and what we are doing. We are looking at the total losses in the shipping industry of ships of the global maritime fleet, which is roughly around 70,000 ships, depending on what estimates you take. But around 70,000 ships in the global fleet, we are looking at total losses year on year. And these are vessels above 100 gross tons. Now, for 2022, the last year, we saw 38 total losses, which is a sharp decline from 2021, which saw 59 total losses, which is a decrease of 36% year on year. In the last decade, we have seen 807 total losses, and the trend has been steadily declining, and we have seen a 65% decline of total losses over the last decade. As I said, we also look at the total number of incidents or casualties that have happened in the last year, and we are analyzing them. And 2022 saw 3,032 total number of shipping and incidents or casualties, and these include the total losses. And this is in comparison to 2021, a very slight increase on the total number of incidents. And the number of incidents have risen slightly over the last few years, but I think the main message here is that the total losses have kept on declining year on year, as you will see in the next slide. So on the next slide, in the bar chart on the left, you will see the steady trend of declining of total losses. I think in the early 1990s or mid 1990s, the shipping industry was losing something like 200 vessels a year, and now we are down to less than 40 vessels, which is a great testament to the work done by the industry themselves and all the various stakeholders, including ship owners, classification societies, insurance, the service industry, the research and development and ship design industry, and all of them have conscientiously done a lot of work, and the result is what we see on the left, the continuous decline of total losses over the years. And I think this is something that is squarely on the agenda of the maritime industry to continue this trend till the time we actually can, if at all possible, come to zero total losses. On the next slide, if we slice and dice these numbers, we can start to see various other trends. We analyze the total losses by the regions and where exactly these total losses have come from. And in 2022, if you can see on the chart on the left, we see top region, top hotspot has been South China, Indochina, Indonesia, and Philippines. Now, on the right side, the chart shows you the total losses for the last decade. And again, the same region, South China, Indochina, has been a hotspot for total losses in the last decade as well, with 204 losses. We have seen in the last couple of years, Arabian Gulf and approaches come up to number 2 this year as well, and previous year as well, with the number 2 spot in total losses. But if you look at the 10-year period, the second spot has been maintained by the East Mediterranean and Black Sea region with 108 total losses in that region. Now, there are various factors, various causes, or various analysis about this as to why the total losses are coming from this particular region, especially South China. It is very hard to pinpoint one particular reason, but there is, as a combination of reasons, you could definitely point towards the harsher weather, the typhoon seasons that there, and a lot of smaller shipping, coastal shipping around, and the older age of the tonnage. These are some of the reasons that could be responsible for South China and Indochina region to be the top spot for total losses. On the next slide, we'll see total losses further analyzed by the type of vessel, and consistently cargo vessels have been the top spot, and they have been lost in the last 10 years as well. 10 vessels were lost in 2022, followed by 6 fishing vessels and 6 passenger vessels, followed by tugs, chemical product tankers, and further down 1 container vessels. If we look at the total losses by the cause, foundering was the highest cause for total losses of the vessels, with 20 vessels lost last year, and fire and explosion coming in second with 8 total losses. Collision with 4. And wrecked vessels, 3 total losses, machinery damage and failure 2, and hull damage 1. And the trends, of course, in these categories itself has been declining as well, but foundering has always been consistently the top cause for total losses. Next slide, please. I think we have quite a lot of other statistics, and for those of you who are numerically inclined, please, we suggest you to go and have a look at the report. There are many more statistics, some very interesting ones. For example, there is one vessel which was involved in 9 incidents in 2022. It was a Greek Island ferry. So some interesting ones as well. But I think let me switch over to one of the key themes of the report, and I think perhaps one of the most stringent challenge that the shipping industry faces in the next 5, 10 to 20 years, which is decarbonization of shipping. Now, I think emissions control, sustainability, climate control has been the agenda of every industry, and shipping industry has not been far off. And we have seen that a lot of work has already been done by various stakeholders in the industry on decarbonization of shipping, and the process and the progress is well underway. We have seen that roughly 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions comes from the shipping industry. And some of the estimates in the reports and the media are quoting a number of $1.4 trillion, which will be required to achieve the targets set by IMO for the decarbonization of the shipping industry. I think there's a range of factors which can help, including green tech, the regulatory environment, and the market forces. I think one of the key pressures which the ship owners are today facing for decarbonization is coming from the commercial side, i.e. the charters of the vessels are now demanding that the carbon footprint for their cargoes being carried across is kept as low as possible, hence forcing the ship owners to utilize various means to reduce the emissions. Apart from this is over and above what the IMO targets have been set. So investments in the alternative fuels is now picking up. We have seen a lot of research and development going on into alternative fuels. Already LNG has been one of the fuels which was suggested as a possibility which could take us to lower emissions, but we all know that LNG in itself is not going to be the answer for us to get to the targets that IMO and shipping industry have adopted. So we are looking at alternative fuels like hydrogen. We are looking at methanol. We are also looking at some of the other green ways of propulsion, i.e. wind-assisted propulsions, and also better efficiency designs which reduce drag on the hulls and improve the fuel efficiency of whichever fuel that we are using. So a lot of investment working is going on in these areas, but the key to all this is going to be collaboration. There is a lot of risk that come along with decarbonization. Whenever there is a massive change in an industry, there are bound to be some unintended consequences, which we expect that the industry will keep a tab on, and risk mitigation measures will be taken well in time before it leads to an issue. On the next slide, we just highlighted some of the key items that we think are going to pose a bit of a risk for the shipping industry on this journey to decarbonization. I think at the moment, the current economic climate and economic downturn means that the investment, which is definitely required in ship design, in further making sure that the alternative fuels that we are using and the infrastructure that needs to be built around is done properly, that investment may be under a bit of a threat. Now, we've seen that the green funding and green capital is being made available by various institutions, financial institutions, but when the economic downturn hits, I think the focus shifts towards the bottom line of the balance sheets rather than issues which we can tend to put on the back burners. Like, there's a general opinion in the shipping industry that if it's not happening today, then we may not have to worry about, and more pressing issues are bottom line. But I think this is one of the risks that we face, that if the economic downturn hits and the freight rates, which are already sliding, continue further, we may see the lack of investment, which is definitely needed in this part. I think the other issue that we have been highlighting for many years now is the risks that are coming with larger vessels, especially on the container ships. And again, decarbonization means that economies of scale is an important aspect to consider when you want to decarbonize shipping, and is that the trend for larger vessels will continue. And this larger vessel trend includes container vessels, but also includes ro-ro ships and some of the other categories of vessels as well. But as the ships grow larger, the risks which we have seen, especially the risk of fire in these vessels, and also sustainability and decarbonization, means that we have also seen a change in type of cargoes that we have seen. Lithium-ion batteries is one in which we'll talk further about in the presentation. One of the other issues that we see that as the downturn hits, as the freight rates decline, the older tonnage is likely to be scrapped, and some of it during the boom right after COVID were actually put back into circulation. And that would mean that recycling of vessels will become a very important aspect of how we deal with shipping. And of course, there are new regulations and requirements put forward by IMO and EU, especially on how we recycle these vessels. And this is going to be an important aspect in decarbonization. Overall, I think decarbonization and sustainability is probably one of the biggest challenges, as I said, in front of our shipping industry, and then we will need to get all stakeholders together to work together to achieve these targets. That's, I think, from my side. I think I'll hand over to Justus for hull and cargo risk.
Thank you, Rahul. Yes, hull and cargo risks. So we see here 4 topics we would like to highlight in this presentation today: cargo fire risks, risks from lithium-ion batteries, mist-declared cargo, and project cargo losses. Cargo fire risks are the biggest causes of claims when it comes, for example, to general average claims on container vessels, and is one of the main causes of total losses across all vessel types, where we saw 64 ships lost in the past 5 years. By claim value, fire is the dominating factor by representing 18% of claims cost incurred. An increase in vessel size and capacity is contributing to that number and suggests that this trend will increase in the future. Lithium-ion batteries are not a bad risk as such or a bad good as such, which is important to point out here again, I think. But the handling and proper declaration of these goods is key to keep it insurable. So there is a different fire risk inherent with this sort of goods, which is increasing because of the decarbonization efforts we see globally. Misdeclared cargo, again, failure to properly declare these goods, document and pack them on board is an issue we see as a dominating cause when it comes to fires and also related then to misdeclared cargo. But there are tools in the market and initiatives ready which could support the tracking of those goods and also discover misdeclared cargo by using, for example, AI. So this is an increasing risk, but not a phenomenon where the industry can just observe, take notice. We as insurer are also very happy to take this up with our insureds and brokers and see where we can together improve and reduce, mitigate this important risk factor. Project cargo losses, transporting large bulky equipment by sea, such as wind turbines, again, something related to the decarbonization efforts we are seeing worldwide, is a highly specialized subsector. And what is most important there is skilled personnel. And skilled personnel, and for example, in our risk barometer, which is yearly published, is always in the middle rank of the most eye-catching risks. And so it's something which is not on top of all risks mentioned, but steadily there, and an industry issue where we see an growing threat going forward. So skilled personnel is key for proper packaging and for good security of goods, and something which is an increasing risk we see in the market for cargo and for hire as well. Next slide. Thank you. In focus, war and crime. Yeah. A sad topic, Ukraine, hull and cargo claims crystallize. Obviously, Black Sea shipping risks remain heightened, and we are facing, as an insurance industry, unprecedented total loss scenarios from vessels and cargoes trapped in Ukrainian ports. In addition to that, we see a highly increasing effort and time spent on due diligence topics, both on the underwriting and on the claims side, obviously. And also when it comes to particular trades like the oil trade, where the oil price cap comes then into play, and also when Russian port calls are planned. So a high demand internally for due diligence has to be noted in this respect as well. Shadow tanker fleets are posing a safety and environmental risk. It's one of the hot topics in the press today, and this is for good reasons, because tanker fleet is representing a significant portion, shadow tanker part is a significant portion of the globally available capacity of tankers, and this portion is growing. So we also need to consider possible claim scenarios in this respect, not only linked to tankers, but obviously mainly as representing the shadow fleet. For example, when it comes to recourse actions, or when it comes to possible detention scenarios when one of the Western insured vessels collides or has an accident with a shadow fleet vessel. Not happened so far for us as AGCS, but scenarios which are just a question of time. Piracy is decreasing globally, so as its lowest level so far recorded, but it's an incident or a risk which still needs further attention from our point of view, because the reason for piracy has not gone away. So obviously a topic for war insurers more than for hull insurers, or for hull and machinery insurers, and a topic which we will carefully observe over the coming year still. Last but not least, cyber attacks, where shipping also is a victim of this growing industry of cyber criminals. And mostly we see this with shore-based attacks, but due to the increasing connectivity of vessels, we can be sure that offshore-based claims will be there in the near future. And we need to consider also the geopolitical conflicts and the cyberspace, which is increasing. So we will definitely see this as an upmoving risk, and we'll have this on our radar as insurers and also as partners for clients and brokers in the discussions how to address risks which are developing. This is it for me so far.
You are muted, Regis. You have to unmute your microphone. There we go.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so some focus on the claims trends, as it has already been said by Rahul Khanna. We have seen the number of total losses significantly decreasing. This is, of course, good news on the claim side. However, in the same time, we have seen the claims cost increasing. Why? I would say for two main reasons. The first one is the size of the vessel. Larger vessels, larger exposure is the trend we have seen over the last 5 years. And the second reason is the inflation that push up severity of hull and machinery losses. Larger vessels, larger exposures. We know that over 2/3 of fleet growth over the next 2 years will be concentrated in the segment of ships larger than 15,000 TEU, while the fleet of ships smaller than 3,000 TEU will reduce. Recent example I can take is was early this year, the new building delivered to the Japanese shipowner One, the One Innovation, giant container vessel of more than 24,000 TEU. Vessel size has a direct correlation to the potential size of loss. That increase in the number of larger vessels leads to higher container cargo accumulation and exposure. This trend could compound the problems seen in recent years with large vessels, including fires, groundings, and port blockages. Responding to incidents is more complex and expensive with large vessels. I would say that trend started in 2018 with the big fire loss sustained by the container vessels Maersk Conam, capacity of 15,000 TEU. Given the size of the vessel, it took more efforts to the sailors, Smith Savage Company, to extinguish the fire and to find a suitable port for such a large vessel. At the end, it was a quite unprecedented situation with a general average contribution, including salvage, reaching the amount of around 50% for cargo interest. In 2021, if the famous Ever Given grounding in the Suez Canal had not been refloated, 6 days after the grounding, thanks to the spring tide, salvage would have required a long and costly process of unloading hundreds of containers, requiring, of course, specialist cranes. 1 year after, last year, after the Ever Given, in March 2022, the containers vessel Ever Forward, grounded in US, could be refloated only after 35-day operation and the offloading of 500 containers. There is many other examples of marine fire, grounding events, but it clearly means that GA costs have significantly increased. The general trend we have seen is more frequent general average cases with higher contributions for cargo and hull interest also. In the past, GA was an intensity claim in the insurance loss ratio. Over the last 5 years, it has become, if I may say, a frequent intensity claim. In the loss ratio of a specific cargo account, we can now see 2 or 3 GA events in the same year, and with higher GA contribution, as I already said, which now often go up to 50%. The second main reason of the claims cost increase is, of course, the inflation that push up, as I said, the severity of hull and machinery losses. The supply chain disruption causing material shortage and increased transportation cost for spare parts is an issue. Shortage in qualified workforce can also be a problem. Repair material costs have also increased as the price of steel, which is a key cost element in hull claims. Shortages and delays in receiving replacement parts also lead to longer stays in repair yards, resulting in higher repair costs. As far as the top causes of loss is concerned, as you can see on the screen, we have the quite classic top 3, but fire is clearly number 1, with a big increase over the recent years, mainly caused by dangerous misdeclared cargo, as lithium battery, as Justus said. Also aggravated by the size of the vessel, more difficult or impossible for the crew to identify the fire and to extinguish the fire on large vessels. Fires on large vessels can spread quickly, often resulting in the crew abandoning the ship. Losses can then be very significant. As already mentioned, this trend will continue in the future with the continuing increase in vessel size. For the same reason, the salvage and general average costs will continue to be higher than in the past. For the shipping incident, collision, groundings, and machinery breakdowns, engine damage, less skilled crew on board could be also a concern for the near future. As it was already highlighted in our safety and shipping report last year, we know that Russian seafarers account for just over 10% of the world's 1.9 million workforce, while around 4% come from the Ukraine, and who are part of the best crew member for engine. So this, we know that these mariners, seafarers, may struggle to return to rejoin ships at the end of their contract. For those who are on the vessel blocked, still blocked due to the war, also the mariners that can be involved in the war. Last word on the natural catastrophes. The stronger weather conditions at sea in the context of the climate change is an important issue for all types of vessels, and again, more particularly for large container vessels, which are, with their high rows of containers, more vulnerable to extreme rolling and pitching in certain sea conditions, exerting extreme stresses on container stacks and their securing system. And we know that we have seen over the last 2 years or so a particular trend for loss of container overboard. I now leave the floor to Ulrich for the conclusion.
Ulrich, you're on mute now.
No, I made the same mistake myself. All right. Thank you, Irina. So I'll speak a bit about what this all might mean for the insurance industry, or what we think it will mean for us at Allianz. Before I get into this, also a reminder, please start thinking about questions you would like to ask us. So we'll go right into the Q&A section after this. There's this chat function in your WebEx. So if there's anything you want to ask the panelists, then please go ahead and submit your questions. So what do all these trends mean for the maritime industry? What does it mean for us? And maybe what does it mean for the market? So we've heard quite a bit on claims frequency. Rahul talked about this, also Regis in his commentary. So that's overall good news that we see in particular on the hull side of the market, a decreasing trend of claims. That's mainly on the total losses, as Rahul outlined, but also to some extent on partial. There's, however, forces that are going against this from a financial perspective, what Regis outlined as well, inflation, rising costs of GA, or salvage costs. So overall, we think despite that good trend of decreasing frequency, we do not see a meaningful resulting decrease in severity. In fact, some of these financial indicators do have a chance of setting the trend into a growing direction. So what this means from an underwriting perspective is certainly to explain this to our clients and brokers and make sure that we remain disciplined in our underwriting approach and make sure we do price for this anticipated increase in claims severity due to these inflationary pressures. Then we talked a bit about decarbonization. So that is really one of the mega trends facing the industry. There's some talk about this on the cargo or inland transit side, but really the big area of transformative power of this trend is as outlined by Rahul on the hull side. So that also has an impact, since global shipping overall is accounting for somewhere between 2 and 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So as an insurance carrier supporting this industry, we are also looking closely at what we can or should do to decarbonize our portfolios. But it's not just that. We also want to take some steps to support our clients and brokers in this transition. There's a few initiatives going on internally for us to understand, first of all, what are some of the best practices, and we're looking to share some of those with our clients and distribution partners. And also we want to understand much more than we do at the moment, what is the correlation between a sustainable operation, an operation that focuses on climate, but also social and governance topics, to loss performance and risk management. Certainly the hypothesis is that sustainable organizations do have a better track record with regards to risk management. Proving this in the data and really understanding what the key levers are and what this might mean for us from an underwriting and pricing perspective is currently one of the areas of focus for us, and I'm sure for many of the other players in the market. Then Justus talked a bit about emerging risks and things that we have seen come up over the last 12 months. We talked about lithium-ion batteries, shadow fleet, the war, and also some of the ongoing issues of fire and misdeclared cargo. So For us as an insurance company, certainly this means that we have to embrace these new challenges, invest into our risk consulting services, and Rahul and his team are well on top of it. We're also thinking about developing new approaches to underwriting these types of risks and exposures. So it's a challenge, but at the same time, as we are in the business of risk management and paying claims, it is also an opportunity for us to help the industry risk manage and overcome these challenges, and that's the way we are approaching it. Net cat capacity is one of the topics of the day. With the ongoing rise in climate change, there are some risks, of course, for insurance companies and our clients to manage that. And at the moment, the capacity is tightening quite a bit. So while the overall market is cooling off a bit with regards to the overall pricing levels in the area of net cat, that is something where we do not see that trend just as much, in particular in the North American area. And the last point I would make on some of these emerging risks, certainly over the last 12 months, maybe a bit longer, due to the Russia-Ukraine situation, the focus on sanctions and internal governance and external implications of that have certainly been a bit of a challenge for the insurance industry. So there's a lot of additional steps insurers need to take to make sure we are fully compliant with these things, and that puts an extra burden on our clients and brokers in responding to these questions, and certainly for us as well from an operational perspective. But overall, I think the outlook is a positive one. The specialty market, and with it also the marine market, is expected to grow over the next decade, somewhere between 3 to 5%. So that is positive. While the market conditions are at the moment still quite favorable overall, there are early signs that that is cooling off a bit, and there are new entrants to the market. So, capacity perspective, we do expect that things will get a bit more competitive in the near-term future. But at the same time, many companies, and certainly Allianz as well, has invested quite a bit into our technical excellence capabilities and really developing a deeper understanding of what drives performance and good risk management. And I think some of these capabilities that have been developed over the last year could result in a bit of a softer swing into a cooling off market. The last point I would make, that goes to Regis' comment on labor shortages. We do, as an industry, face that challenge as well. Strong talent on the underwriting side, on the claim side, on the risk engineering side, etc., is a bit of a problem. The market for talent is a bit challenged at the moment. So it does not just affect our clients and our distribution partners, but certainly us as well on the insurance side. And with that, I would go into the Q&A section. So again, as a reminder, please do submit your questions on the Q&A in the WebEx. There's this functionality. I would also introduce now Marcel Ackermann, who is on the panel with us, Global Product Leader for Cargo. He's also available for any and all of your questions. So please ask us and use the chat functionality to do so. And I do have a few questions are being submitted here, so thank you for that. And maybe the first one goes to Rahul, which is on the decarbonization that we talked about a bit. So from a risk perspective, Halle Machinery, what risks do you see from these alternative fuels that are being introduced and as the industry transforms?
Thanks, Ulrich. I think a little bit of us said already earlier that alternative fuels, there are many which are being touted as part of the solution to our emissions control over the next 5, 10 to 20 years. Methanol, hydrogen, ammonia are a few which are being researched upon, and I think methanol-based engines are already in operation. The key issues that we know is that for all the fuels that are in use, there is a short-term damage, and then there is a long-term damage on engines and impact. So for any new introduction of fuels, we would not know what the long-term damages could be, and it is very difficult to predict and even test those before we introduce them. So one of the issues is clearly which fuel is going to cause what sort of long-term damages to the engines, and as we already know from analysis, machinery damage is one of the top causes of losses that we see in the industry. So clearly, if there is an uptick or if there is some risk mitigation lapses in adoption of these fuels over the vessels, how is that going to impact the engines and machinery damages? We don't know as yet. Hopefully, the impact will not be much. That's all. That is what we hope. But there's definitely a case for that. I think then the other issue is that not just the alternative fuels, we are also looking at newer ship designs to reduce or improve efficiencies and other measures. It may be that we may have to come up from all types of traditional fuels, and we are also talking about engines, propulsion based on batteries and lithium-ion batteries. We've already spoken about that the batteries do come up with some sort of inherent risk if not maintained and manufactured correctly, and if they are damaged. So these are the other risks that we think will come across and surface as these technologies are scaled and more ships start adopting these and start flying the oceans. So clearly, a couple of things to really think about. And lastly, I think the investment needed in this industry is a huge amount of investment. But the targets are looming. We have to achieve the 40% reductions of carbon intensity indication reductions. We have to do that. Shipping industry needs to do that, and that also sometimes causes some of the owners or some of the other players to introduce shortcuts, which may not be the best things that we see, and introduce a further risk to the shipping industry.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Rahul. Now there's a number of questions coming in, so thank you for the lively interest. Starting off with the next one here. How much of an underwriting risk is a crew worker safety on board of ships for marine insurers, as AGCS operates outside of the marine protection and indemnity sector, where the vast bulk of maritime liability insurance covers are written? So crew worker safety, how much is that of an underwriting concern for us? Maybe is it more so an underwriting concern for P&I clubs? So maybe it's a question between Rahul and Justus. Whoever speaks first gets it.
I can start and Rahul can elaborate. Maybe we do it like this. Underwriting is looking at that factor thoroughly. Why? Because all the topics we just talked about and also linked to personal education and so on is critical. So risk quality is highly depending on that, not only for a liability insurer, but also for a casualty insurer like an H&M insurer. And we do consider this also in our tools. So we look, for example, also at crew retention rates, just to give you a concrete example. Whenever we get more information on things like that, let's call it soft factors beside pricing and hard-coded actuarial factors, the more we get, the better we can understand the risk, and the better we can respond also to certain pressures in the underwriting discussion. It's definitely of high importance for us, and also seen in claims if something goes bust. So there's also proven by numbers, looking at the claims pattern, a significant importance of that factor for underwriting.
Yeah, I may add that I think it's true that in a crew injury and any issues with the crews are generally dealt with the P&I sector, but these statistics are a clear indicator of how the vessel is operated, and that is our key concern when we are looking at a risk. Our risk assessment process, which Allianz Risk Consulting engineers would do on request of our underwriters, and we sit together to assess not just the hull and machinery side of risk, but also in general how the vessel is operated, and that includes crew safety. And we all know that human error is roughly responsible for something like 80 to 90%, depending on what numbers and what study. But they are responsible for most of the causes. So if there are more crew injuries and crew safety is not the prime concern for a ship owner, this would somehow effectively translate into losses in other parts and segments of the ship operation as well. So we truly believe that crew safety is a true one of the important indicators on how effectively a vessel will run, and will eventually have an impact on the loss ratios of those vessels on hull and machinery side as well. So for us, it's equally important. We are looking at whenever we are visiting our clients on hull side, we are reviewing their procedures on training, on crew welfare, and even now we are looking at mental well-being of the seafarers, especially after COVID and what has happened. And the other issue of criminalization of seafarers, these are all issues that we do consider during our assessments and are important to us as much as probably the P&I insurance.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you both. Now we do have only just about 50 minutes left. There's lots of questions coming in. There's two questions on the size of vessels, which we covered in our presentation. And the question is there a concern that that these increasing sizes of vessels are maybe incompatible with risk management? So are these two going in different directions? And maybe is there a way to calculate this increased exposure and what it might mean for the number of incidents of frequency or misdeclared cargo or fires, as well as costs for loss and salvage? So I think it's a question on both hull and cargo. So maybe Marcel and Justus have an opinion, and maybe Regis also on salvage costs and claims.
I think it is certainly a more challenging area with the sizes of the vessels increasing. And I think to put it simply, if you have a container vessel with 12,000 TEU and you have a container vessel with 24,000 TEU, the chances of a container being on board that causes a fire is double. And obviously the complexity of the operation to extinguish that fire becomes exponentially greater and more complex with the size of the vessel. But from a risk management point of view, I think it is manageable, but its challenges that are new, that are coming with these bigger vessels. And I think that and the challenges with misdeclared cargo or wrongly stored cargo for hazardous goods is not a new challenge, but one that becomes of increasing importance to be addressed with the increasing size of vessels. I think that's the way I would look at it from a cargo point of view.
Yeah, and hull is strongly linked to that, no surprise. And just taking the cargo values, so the average container value between 30 and 50,000 US dollar, what I heard just recently, illustrates when we are looking at 20,000 containers on one vessel, what that could mean in terms of accumulation. And when we then look at the vessel value itself as well from these mega ships, we see a significant capacity demand. And if we then think about also GA, so I don't want to steal the claims topic, but from an underwriting perspective, it's also a consideration when talking about small GAs, for example, because these sums are rapidly eaten up by these accumulation scenarios then. So just to add from a high perspective, these 2 points maybe.
Yeah, I fully agree, Justus. It's really a good demonstration of the trend we have seen, with the GA salvage cost increasing. I remember 20 years ago, the small general average clause in a hull policy was around 200,000 USD, and then going up to maybe maximum 500,000. And nowadays, especially on container vessel fleet, we see a small general average of above 1 million. I have in mind one situation with one case with 3 million. So then the hull and machinery policy take a big amount when the philosophy of the small general average was to do a kind of fast track solution instead of going to a long process of GA adjustment. And nowadays we see that the small GA clause, it's maybe we should remove the small word of the clause of the title of the clause. And as I quickly explained during the presentation, yes, the salvage and GA have increased a lot because, and due to the size of the vessel, the difficulties for the salvage company to extinguish the fire, like for the Maersk or to tow the vessel and then to find a suitable port. And you know that especially when this is big event, there is a Lloyd's open form signed, and the Lloyd's open form is handed when the vessel is in the port of refuge, safe port. So the longer the sailors need to find safe port, the longer the clock run, you know, for the salvage award.
Yeah. Thank you all. Okay, so we've got another question that pertains to use of data and artificial intelligence. There's a huge hype around that at the moment, and do we foresee artificial intelligence playing a role in the maritime industry as well? For example, in aiding to reduce human-related factors. I think the answer is yes on both risk engineering, claims, and also underwriting. So maybe we'll have all of our panelists comment on that. Rahul, it looked like you wanted to start.
Yeah, I think there's, you mentioned earlier that this AI, machine learning, and in general, digitalization is creeping into the industry quite rapidly. And there is definitely a lot of use cases being presented in the last few years. We personally have seen quite a few use cases where AI-based technologies are helping to firstly assess the risks a lot better. And then, secondly, in the analysis and in the risk protection as well. I mean, one particular technology example is of what I've recently seen is cameras and CCTVs based technology on board ships to identify hazards as they are developing. And it's not that they're just recording. The AI platform behind this data coming in from visual recordings is being analyzed in real time, and if there is a risk spotted or a hazard spotted, it is alerted. The crew members are alerted to something. For example, it could be that it takes a while for a fire to be detected by human eye and by persons on board. But if you have infrared cameras and CCTV footage in different parts of the vessel, the alerts could be much quicker. And that would mean that the crew of the vessel are able to address the fire in the very first moments, which is very essential to contain a fire. So this is just one example, but I think there are many other examples and many other technologies which are now coming out where they are focusing on to preventive measures rather than once the incident happened and controlling the risk of fire or any such incident.
And there's also technologies being used by some of the shipping companies to identify misdeclared cargoes by screening booking information, by looking for suspicious bookings to have a better way to detect cargoes that have been misdeclared that potentially could become an issue during the voyage, either for fire or for containers going overboard because they're not properly secured, or the weight distribution. So I think AI is also used in these areas by shipping companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I can add as well from an underwriting side, it's certainly something we're looking into as well. There's lots of data available these days, much more than there used to be. And using both our internal data as well as externally available data on both shipping and cargo is one of the things we do focus on, and one of the things we do use to predict the risk and identify maybe not known before correlations between well risk managed accounts and maybe the ones that do require a bit more attention. Then there's two questions here on project cargo, and it's so what are the main causes regarding project cargo claims? Are there maybe certain trends regarding project cargo claims? And is there maybe a good example of a case that has triggered a DSU type of loss? And I think Regis, I'm sure you can think of one in the next.
Yes, I can figure one. It was in 2019, and the vast majority of the cargo loss was the DSU loss. So this is really a very high volatility cover for cargo. So for covering this kind of volatile risk, you need to have a strong portfolio on this project cargo side, but I'm sure that Marcel can elaborate more on this. And I can say that we have seen a particular trend on project cargo for AGCS, but of course, all the information we shared with you regarding the larger the vessel, the larger the risk exposure, but also the bad weather condition in the context of the climate change can have an impact on the project cargo. But so far, no, not specific trend. I think maybe Rahul have some feedback, I would say, on his side from the market.
Yeah. I think in the last couple of years, we have definitely seen an uptick on project cargo losses, and definitely near misses. Now, this is a very specialized field where procedures needs to be followed to the T, and any small mishap in ensuring that the securing of cargo is not done properly and as per the required regulations would mean a major loss. Now, we have one last year, one publicized loss where a large piece of equipment, a few hundred tons, was lost or overboard during not so much of a bad weather, but all pointers are indicating that the securing wasn't done properly. The cargo was carried on deck, and most importantly, on a bulk carrier. Now, this was one of the issues that has been highlighted, that project cargo equipment, which is very expensive critical equipment and can have a DSU impact, should always be carried on specialized project cargo or break bulk vessels, and not general vessels like bulk carrier. Now, because of freight rates height and increase, I think some shippers had used this capacity on some of the bulk carriers, but the consequence, it hasn't been that great. Now, the reasons for project cargo claims in general could be varied. It could be severe bad weather. It could be sinking of the vessel for any for a non-related reason to project cargo. But there have been many project cargo losses where lashing and securing wasn't done correctly, or was done but wasn't done to the limits that are required to sustain the perils of the sea, for especially when bad weather and rolling and pitching expected. Typically, these are heavy bulky equipment, and once one item gets loose in the cargo hold, it will eventually impact and damage a lot of cargo around while it starts moving. And it is almost next to impossible to resecure such cargo once it becomes fully loose in a seaway. So I think from project cargo perspective, I think we have definitely seen an uptick in near misses and some losses from our network of surveying community around the world. We have seen, and primary reason what has been quoted around is that the specialized skills and knowledge needed for securing such cargo is being missing and or lacking.
And maybe all I can add is, for us in our portfolio, we haven't seen the increase, but it's also strongly linked to our underwriting approach, which is linked with the ARC risk management approach. So any project cargo risk that we lead, we have a strong focus on risk management in both our ARC team, and they have helped our clients and us to avoid losses by making sure that the procedures are right. And like Rahul pointed out earlier in the presentation, the skill shortage is also affecting the industry to move heavy lift cargo, and I think that's where maybe mistakes creep in or the experience is not there, and I think where an ARC approach or risk management approach becomes even more important.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you all. So unfortunately, we are at the hour, and with that, at the end of this webinar. I think there was a brief message from our communications colleagues. There are a few questions that we unfortunately did not get to, so we will follow that up via email, but still thank you for your interest. So we'll make sure to get back to you. The whole seminar webinar will be available for download on our website, as well as is the safety shipping report, in case you haven't seen it. So then I would like to thank you very much again for your interest in this webinar, and I hope to see you next year as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.